Good morning, members. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through the Council website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad, or if you catch my eye. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it's intended as part of the discussion. Usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be taken by roll call. If you have to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you come back. All members should speak clearly, taking their time and speaking directly into the microphone when making contributions. And when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. So, on to the meeting itself. Claire, could you please provide Cedrin and apologies?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've been advised of 2 apologies this morning from Councillors Brodie and Hagman. I've also been advised that Councillor Ingalls will be joining us later. There's 9 members currently present, 4 in the hall, being yourself, Chair, Councillors Beretti, Dashper and Stitch. We have 5 members present on Teams, being the Vice Chair, Councillors Giusti, Johnston, Marsh and Marshall. 3 members currently not present, being Councillors McGregor, McCammon and Scobie. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. And just to say that I approve of members' remote participation. So, any declarations of interest or statement of connection from members? No? Okay. So that takes us on to the minute of the previous meeting of the 24th of September. Are we happy to approve the minutes of that meeting? Okay, thank you. So that's on to item 4, the report by external audit on 23-24 audit of Dumfries and Galloway Council. Gillian Ross is here from the Council, and Peter Lindsay and Fiona Mitchell-Knight are here from Audit Scotland to assist members if you have any questions. So over to members. Any questions on this report? Councillor Beretti.
I've got sorry, Chair, got a number of questions, so do you want me to ask one at a time or all the entire list?
I think before we get into that, I should probably do the courtesy to the report authors. Is there anything you'd like to add in case the report doesn't sort of speak for itself? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. And it's normal for me just to give a quick summary of our report, to highlight our key findings and then to give you the opportunity to answer questions, as this is an important part of the governance assurance and the independent assurance you get, particularly in terms of the accounts, to enable you to approve them for signing. And the package that you have today includes a letter which summarises that our audit is complete. And it says that as a result of our audit, we'll be issuing a clean audit opinion, so a true and fair opinion on the accounts. So we're satisfied that the accounts have been prepared in a way that complies with accounting rules and regulations and fairly presents the transactions of the council. We identified a number of errors in the accounts that have been adjusted, and I'll come on to those in a moment. And there remain 3 items where we identified errors and they have not been adjusted in the accounts, what we call unadjusted misstatements. But we're comfortable that the council has decided not to make those changes because they're in the region of 500,000 and well below the materiality on the accounts. So very comfortable with what's appearing in the accounts. In the package of papers is also what we call a letter of representation, and it's the final part of the audit jigsaw that the council provide to us just to confirm the basis on which the accounts are prepared. And there's nothing unusual in that letter, so please just to give you assurance on that. I'd just like to reflect on the key messages then in our annual audit report, which summarises our findings both on the accounts and on our wider scope audit work, and that's at page 31 of your papers. And the first section refers to the annual accounts audit, and as I say, a a clean audit opinion, unmodified audit opinions, whatever terminology you're used to. But I would draw to your attention a number of significant findings and key audit matters that we are required to bring to your attention before you approve the accounts. And they appear from page 38 in our report. And I'll just run through the largest of those and just to explain the context of those. So the first relates to the Crichton estate. And the Crichton estate is owned by the council and has legal ownership for the estate. But it is leased out to the Crichton Trust, and it's based on a 150-year lease. And as a result, the appropriate accounting treatment in this situation is for the Crichton Trust to be treated as a finance lease in the accounts of the council. So there's no dispute about the ownership or anything like that, but from an accounting perspective, it's recognition that the council is not gaining benefit on an ongoing basis operating on the trust in providing council services. So this was something we identified this year as part of our sample testing, and as a result, the changes have been made to the accounts to reflect that, and also a prior year adjustment was made in the accounts. The second big change that was made was relating to pension balances, and pension liabilities and assets vary hugely and swing significantly from year to year and even from month to month depending on what's happening in the financial markets and the values at any point in time. And this is what happened here. So there was a movement between the estimate that was used in the accounts and the actual final year-end figures for the quarter four. And because that movement was so significant, the accounts were changed to reflect that movement. So again, nothing unusual or untoward about that. It was just a movement in the valuations. The third finding relates to the IJB, and there was an error in journalising some of the transactions for the IJB balances, and that has been corrected in the accounts. It makes nil impact on the bottom line for the council's accounts. And the remaining two items are much smaller and have been adjusted in the accounts and had no impact on the deficit on the provision of services. So I won't go into those in detail, but if members have any questions about those later, happy to answer them. If I go back to key messages in our report, so our report is not just on our audit of the accounts, we also have a really important role in reporting on what we call wider scope audit work. So that's best value, the financial management and financial sustainability and the governance of the council. And we include in our annual audit report all the findings that we've had on the council from this year. And the section on best value is an overarching section. And best value, I suppose in simple terms, is about continuous improvement in the council and how well the council is improving going forward and how well it uses its resources in delivery against its objectives. And I'm pleased to say that we report that the council's leadership demonstrate a collective commitment to best value, there's effective self-evaluation and the support for continuous improvement. So we do say that the council's leadership now needs to keep up that pace of improvement and demonstrate that the arrangements are being effective in driving delivery of the new strategic outcomes in the council's plan. Pleased to say the council's made good progress with our prior year best value recommendations, 6 of those that were included in a report earlier in the year on the council's leadership in the development of new local strategic priorities, so good news there. We also reported in June on our work on workforce planning, and we reflect on the findings from that work in our annual audit report also. And that includes an improvement action points from that work we've done on workforce planning. Some of the areas where improvements have been made recently are reflected in our key messages. So we reflect the fact that following recommendations we made earlier, local government benchmarking framework data is now reported to elected members, and that shows for elected members how the council performs over time, how it compares with other councils, and how it can prioritise its improvement actions more effectively to learn from others. So good news there. We reflect positively on the annual delivery plan that sets out how the council's to deliver on its strategic outcomes. So a key part of best value, as I said, is about council being able to demonstrate that it has effective plans and delivers on what it's set out to do. So reporting on progress against the plan is really important. And we also reflect on the fact that, in our opinion, the Council now complies with the requirements of the Statutory Performance Information Direction. So last year we made recommendations for improvement with regard to public performance reporting, and pleased to say those have been implemented. If I turn over the page 32 of your papers, so in our section on financial management, we reflect on the performance of the Council in its current year's accounts. And we reflect that the Council operated within budget in 23-24 after achieving service savings. And pleased to report there was an increase in usable reserves at March 2024. We conclude that the Council has appropriate and effective financial management processes in place to manage its budget, and that budget monitoring reports provided to elected members allow effective scrutiny of the finances. Looking forward, our section on financial sustainability reports on our views on Council's position into the medium and longer term, and we report positively that there's a 3-year budget covering the period 24-25 to 26-27, and that financial plans are aligned to the Council plan as part of that. But of course there is a funding gap that needs to be addressed by 26-27, and plans are underway on how that's going to be achieved. And we note, of course, your ongoing consultation with the public currently around the budget proposals that will be discussed by the Council in the context of those medium-term plans going forward. And key to delivery of your financial position over the longer term is delivery of the change and savings programmes, which is also developed as part of your 3-year planning process. And delivery against those programmes will be absolutely key, and it will be key that elected members support officers in setting out a longer term financial plan that demonstrates sustainability of services and recurring savings for sustaining the financial position of the Council. We reflect on vision, leadership and governance, and we reflect on the reviews that have been done both in terms of the elected member leadership arrangements this year and also changes to the officers' leadership arrangements that reflect a structure that's designed to deliver against the Council's priorities. And we say that appropriate governance and decision-making arrangements are in place in the Council. But we do report on the fact that internal audit services need to improve, and that there was an external quality assessment done independently, which reported on a number of areas for improvement. And we've raised a recommendation in our annual audit report that says that the Chief Internal Auditor needs support to ensure he has capacity to be able to deliver on those recommendations. And at page 68 of the report, I summarise the areas for improvement, and there are some really important areas there that need to be addressed by the Council, including the organisational independence of internal audit. So it's not currently in line with best practice, as the internal audit manager doesn't have authority to report in his own name or attend the CMT without the approval of the Head of Governance and Assurance. We report on the focus of the accounts at the internal audit plan, and that's not being based on a risk-based approach that aligns with the organisational strategic objectives. So that's important to make sure that internal audit is focusing on the right things that have the most impact. And we say that periodic and formalised meetings between the Chief Executive and the Internal Audit Manager are not in place, and with the Chair of the Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee. And they're important to ensure that the Council demonstrates that independence of internal audit, and internal audit have the opportunity to raise matters in all aspects of the Council's activities as appropriate. And the rest of the recommendations are laid out for you there. And as I say, we've raised a recommendation that the Council's management team need to support the improvements required to demonstrate improvements with those recognised internal audit standards. The final section of my report is on the use of resources to improve outcomes, and this is where we reflect on the actual performance of the council and how effectively resources are being applied. So pleased to say that the council reports effectively against its own performance service business plan targets, and those show that the council was on track to achieve many of the council plan performance targets, so 73% of the targets are on track. I've also referred to the fact that the council is now reflecting on its performance using the local government benchmarking framework information. And whilst that doesn't all clearly align with the council's own strategic priorities, it does show that 48% of the national indicators are in the top quartiles of councils, which is good news for you. However, that has fallen from 55%, showing that the rate of service improvement has slowed slightly compared to others. But of course, as I say, that's not focused on the strategic priorities that are the particular focus for the council, but it's useful context. And then finally reflect on, the detailed analysis that comes to members now on that data, which is useful in helping the council to focus on its improvement areas. In our annual audit report, we have an action plan, and that's at page 76, and we raised one new recommendation as a result of completion of a final part of the audit, and that was relating to the external quality assessment of internal audit. And management have accepted our recommendation there and agreed to implement those improvements by the 1st of April 2025. And you as a committee will obviously want to be assured that those are being actioned, because clearly internal audit's a really important part of the governance structure and assurance processes that are delivered to this committee. We also replicate the recommendations from our best value work and include an update on previous year's actions in our action plan. So that's one place where you can see all of our actions reflected so that they're reported in one place. I'm pleased to say that there's been good progress against actions that have been reported in previous years. So a lot there in a quick run through, but thanks for the opportunity just to present those findings, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. And I suppose technically we have already done recommendation 1, which is agree to receive the external auditor's report. And thanks for that, walking us through that. So that takes us back to Councillor Barretti. So do you still have some questions?
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for knocking a few of those questions off my list now. But yeah, there's still one or two. Page 50, point 51, the benchmarking over a year. Are we going to see how that is presented? It's nice to know that there is. You've made the point, but where do we see that benchmarking? Now, I might not. I'm trying to reword some of my things because I noticed that I did have quite a few questions, so I have to rethink which ones I want to ask. And page 51, the health and well-being, the action's not started, and it's a question of what evidence do you see that some of these things are changing? And there is another question on page 85 about climate change. I'll just get to it. Sorry, 84. B/F2 in your middle column, which is recommendations and agreed actions. You say that the cross-party climate group, and as the wording you have there, updates to committee will reflect their recommendations and considerations. What are you basing that evidence on? And would there be an improvement action if you saw different evidence? Thank you, Chair.
So just on the first point about benchmarking, which page was that you were referring to?
50.
Page 50, okay, thanks.
So thank you for the questions. In terms of the benchmarking reports, we don't audit those in detail. What we looked at there was for the council to introduce a process to report on the benchmarking framework information to members and then the members have an opportunity to question officers on the accuracy of the reports through their discussions. So we haven't audited or made comments on the accuracy of the reports. We just report on what the council there has reported itself. Specifically on the climate change target, again, we haven't audited what the council has said there. What the point we were making at that point was that the council had declared certain priorities and targets in 2019 relating to the climate emergency, but then the references to those targets had disappeared through the new council plans, and so we recommended that the council be clear in what its expectations were going forward about its targets and had processes for reporting against that, and that's what we're seeing there that we're referring to in March 2024. That there's now been clarity provided to members about the targets going forward and how progress will be reported against.
Thank you. Does that address your questions, Councillor Beretti?
On the last one, I'm not entirely certain that that might be reflective in what is written down here, because that tells me something different as to what was just mentioned there. So how do I then take that forward? And I don't know if it's in Fiona's case, because I don't know if she's got the evidence or this is something that we have to do internally.
So I think what I took from this report was that this is external audit's inspection of what effectively we are doing and what we've said we would do. And I think she's signposting where we might then look at that in terms of our own monitoring of our work programme and our commitments. I don't know if I picked up wrong there, Fiona, but it looks like you've looked at what we've said we would do and what we're doing and made recommendations, and then I suppose it's up to us as elected members internally to then monitor our performance and see if that satisfies in terms of the goals we've set ourselves. I don't know if that helps, Councillor Beretti, or if you want to add to that, Fiona. Okay, we'll leave that there for now. Councillor Dryborough?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for your report, Fiona. And you answered my first question, which I withdrew, but then you raised an issue during that particular thing, and I saw the internal audit managers meetings with the chair and vice chair. I mean, we normally have a pre-meeting with the internal audit manager at that, and we'll have that at least 4 times a year. So I'm just wondering if you're taking that into account there, or do you wish to get the internal audit manager to meet with chair and vice chair separate from the pre-meetings that we have?
Yes, Councillor Dryborough, we would recommend that it was a sort of private between the chair and the vice chair, separate meetings with the internal audit manager.
Okay, right, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Dryborough. I don't know if you want to add anything, lad. Obviously, this is we kind of meet as a team prior to committee, but we certainly do have informal conversations with internal audit, you know, just around concerns or updates. So, lad, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you. And I think what it's shown there in the report is already actions that are already on track and have been reported already to Audit, Risk and Scrutiny. So in terms of the outcomes of that assessment and the fact that we are carrying out a review of the internal audit function, that's all in hand, and actually quite a lot of the actions that are there have already been actioned, including, for example, regular meetings with the Chief Exec and so on. So I can give that assurance to all members that these things are happening already, and that most, if not all of those actions are either on track or have already been completed.
Thank you. I have actually a couple of questions myself, if that's okay. So you did mention, or indicate the arrangements about how we report the Crichton asset, and I think members are due to receive a briefing on that, because I think we're concerned just about we've got the correct oversight of that. So I'll maybe allow Vlad to speak to that in a minute. But the other thing was, I think it's page 39, page 40. There's a couple of other misreported items. One related to non-domestic NDR, and the other one was to do with, well, I don't think it'd be out of school for saying it was to do with a Lockerbie Trust, which awarded an amount of money to be spent in Lockerbie and play parks, and that was to the tune of about £500,000, which obviously you've highlighted there, but kind of a special case in this, which you've obviously looked into that and maybe seen the details behind that. So in terms of, I did wonder about the next one, about the capitalisation, because it did refer to 0.5, and I just wondered if that was a specific project which had been sort of misreported, and if you're able to speak to that, or if that's something that could be highlighted. The other comment I would make is that it's refreshing, as always, to see the detail about the common good, which is a pet favourite of mine. But I did wonder, I think on page, whenever it lists the sort of the assets, there's a few common good funds which don't have subcommittees attached to them. So the nature or the limited nature of some of the business in certain common good areas means that they don't necessarily warrant having a common good subcommittee. So the oversight from elected members is limited and often goes to area committee, which is one of our reporting arrangements. So there's details in there that if I looked at this report, I'd say, I'm not sure all that's 100% accurate, but it's probably good enough to get through today. But I know also that Vlad's maybe could maybe speak to that as well in terms of how we deal with common goods consistently across the region. So, but if you could maybe address a couple of the other points there, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. So just, I thought I would explain the first two in terms of the non-domestic rates and the capital grant funding that you referenced there. So in terms of the non-domestic rates, you'll be aware that there was a new policy that was introduced last year in relation to the relief. And there was no accounting guidance provided by SITFA or the Scottish Government in terms of how that should be accounted for during the year. So when we prepared the draft accounts, we taken a position where we netted that off the cost of those reliefs against the gross income that we got from the Scottish Government for non-domestic rates and replaced that net within the accounts. As part of the audit, we agreed that that may not be the correct accounting, and we have then since moved the cost of the relief up into the cost of services section, which then reflects that gross income received from the Scottish Government. So there's no net bottom line impact in terms of cash, it was just how we treat that new policy, and because there was no accounting guidance, it was just, we had to make a decision, you know, in terms of how to refer that for the accounts. In terms of the capital grant funding, the 5.436 that's mentioned in 0.5, that was in relation to the Scottish Government's approach to funding the pay award. So that instead of paying that through revenue resources, which is because it's a revenue cost, they actually provided us with capital funding to support that cost in 23-24. Again, there was advice and guidance provided in terms of how to account for that, and as part of the accounting we moved the resources from one area to another but skipped a step, and that it should have went through another account to come back out of that account to go where it went. So the accounting changes were simply to reflect that further transfer of resources that should have been reflected. So it was an accounting aspect, but again, it had no bottom line impact in terms of cash, in terms of those kind of details. I think the other one you mentioned was in relation to the grant, you know, for the play parks. And again, our normal policy has always been that where we receive grant funding and we haven't spent it, we carry that resource forward to meet the costs in the new financial year under the matching principle. However, the auditors have indicated that because there was no restrictions on that grant in terms of that it could be used for other purposes, or there was no restrictions in terms of needing the money to be paid back to the trust, that income should have been fully recorded as being received in the year, and then the resources that were unspent should have been transferred to the capital fund to then be used later on. So again, the whole principle in terms of where the resources is, there's no impact in terms of we would have changed the treatment, but the cash aspect would have changed between the years.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. And just on the other points about the briefing for members on the oversight of the Crichton Trust and or the Crichton Estate and the update v common good and when we might expect something coming back to members. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The first one is in regards to the briefing, which we are in the process of drafting, and then thereafter will come to Chair and Vice Chair first, and then I think all elected members, I think, is at the request of Chair and Vice Chair, and that briefing will entail, in essence, what the arrangements are between the Council and the Crichton, particularly in regards to the lease, and what controls or otherwise we have around that, but also maybe a look at the governance that we previously had, and potentially consider whether there's any room for any future governance around an outside body. So we'll finalise that draft and get that to members. So conscious that we've been asked to do that and that we have been working on that. There's other matters, obviously, that we're dealing with, in particular the accounts. They're quite clearly highlighted at this point. In regards to common good, as you members will hopefully see, we've got, I think, within page 143, kind of future improvements and next steps. So we've already got a project that we've been working on, but it's taken us a lot longer, probably because of the complexities around common good, and also because we've included not just common goods but other trusts as well within that, which are a separate legal entity as such, but we are putting it all together because of the way that we're managing it. So we're looking to report to that certainly within this 24-25 calendar, so that will be for members, and I suspect that the best route for that is probably a briefing for members first and foremost, which might take the shape of some kind of workshop just to go over that, or going around the political groups, depending on what members think is best.
Okay. Thank you, Vlad. Councillor Dashper.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 70, point 129. It refers to our individual service plans in case of interruption to our ICT infrastructure. And then it also says that the plans haven't been tested since 2019. So I'm just wondering, do we feel that that's quite far away? Is it future-proof? Can we get some comment on that? Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm not sure if I should pass this internally or to the external auditors in terms of, so was there any recommendation arising from this in terms of the action plan? Because it does identify it there, but it's maybe not of a significant nature according to your own standards.
Obviously this was picked up from our work and also from the report that went to Audit, Risk and Scrutiny in April, and officers advised that plans were in hand to address that. So we didn't raise it as a recommendation, no.
Yeah. Thank you. So that would relate to the cyber security reports that we had recently.
Yeah.
So it's probably been covered, but in terms of the report in front of us, which is kind of retrospective, there might have been a path that said, oh, from this identified concern, there's a recommendation, but that's been addressed. So I think there's maybe just joining up the dots there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions on this? Councillor Stitt.
Just maybe a comment, Chair. I haven't been on the committee for years, but I'm looking at page 71 on to 72 about KPIs, and halfway down your education, quality and curriculum, I find it's quite hard to take that 15 targets haven't been met within acceptable limits. It's just a comment, because over page it says it's much in par with the year previous. Do you think there'll be any improvement shown in the next year? Because I think 15 out of that total is absolutely shocking in my eyes, because I sit in that committee. Just some.
Yeah, so I mean, it is concerning when you look at some of the figures, but I think the general message seemed to be there were improvements, even though it's not reached the sort of targets we've set. So, but again, and I'll look over to the external auditors whose report it is, but presumably, in line with what Fiona was saying, this is where we would, in our own reporting mechanisms, want to drive that improvement. But I can't speak for you, but I'm sort of second guessing you a little bit. But Fiona?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the important thing that this shows is that you now have the information to be able to challenge and scrutinise that information and ask those questions of officers yourself, which we've been driving. So, yeah, welcome the fact that you can now see that and challenge it in the appropriate forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just page 66. It's the role of the Chief Financial Officer. In 108 it states it's good practice for the Section 95 or the Chief Financial Officer to report directly to the Chief Executive. Whereas under the new leadership structure that we implemented on the 1st of April, and the effectiveness of that won't be reviewed until the end of 2025. I'm just wondering if it's good practice, because it would suggest it's not. I know that the Chief Financial Officer also sits on the senior management team, but there is no direct reporting to the Chief Executive. And just with the new restructure, because it does state as well that roles within the council will have to change. I think it's on, there will have to be a restructure and people redeployed to actually make some of the improvements in the council structure, and whether or not the new chief officer the new chief officer structure has been implemented to kind of deal with that, because with the new implementation of the structure, we actually seen a budget pressure because it was an increased cost on having the 16 officers over £100,000. And finally, just with regards to page 71, again, it follows on from Councillor Stett. When you look overall at the 411 KPIs, 1 in 5 is off target. And I'm just wondering how that compares with, if there is analysis with other local authorities in Scotland.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. I think for the first part, I'll pass over to Vlad, who might be able to speak to the Section 95 officer role. And then for the rest, I'll see what the team says over there. But Vlad?
Yes, thank you. I think, and Gillian may wish to come in on that as well. Just to clarify, probably in terms of the statutory officers' roles, as we would call it, so both Section 95 and the monitoring officer, and obviously you've got the internal audit function within that. First and foremost, we've got regular meetings on that individual basis with the chief executive. So although that's not reflected there, that's a very clear arrangement in which it allows both the Section 95 officer and the monitoring officer to have that direct contact and also direction as appropriate from the chief exec, and that line is uninterrupted through our management arrangements, which is maybe slightly different in terms of the kind of day-to-day management of the overall teams and so on. So I think the assurance I would give members is that we have a direct line to the chief exec. These are regular meetings that are set up on a monthly basis to deal with all matters that the chief exec needs to be either informed or the chief exec wishes for either Section 95 officer or the monitoring officer to take forward. Not sure if Gillian wishes to add to that through yourself, Chair.
Thanks, Vlad. Just to reaffirm that I'm not aware of there being any issues with the current reporting arrangements that are causing any concern in relation to the ability to raise concerns with members or as part of the overall council approach. As Vlad's indicated, there are regular statutory officer meetings direct with the Chief Executive, as well as a permanent seat on the SLT in terms of being aware of the overall wider considerations for the council. So I don't, while it's a recommended good practice, I don't think our current approach is hindering any requirements associated with the statutory officer role at this point in time.
Thank you. So just to then pass the other parts of the question over to external audit, I suppose that's the internal view, but Councillor Marshall, I suppose, rightly asking your view in terms of externally auditing that. Is that appropriate or within good practice, or not bad practice anyway? And the other part is to do with the benchmarking of the 1 in 5 statistics, and also the cost of change, if you like, in terms of the senior structure, and whether that additional revenue will bear, is appropriately arranged to bring the benefits that we hope it does. Thank you.
Thank you. On the role of the Chief Financial Officer, we draw to your attention, what is good practice, and that is direct reporting to the Chief Exec and a member of the leadership team. But we recognise in many councils that isn't always the arrangements in practice. So what we're explaining there is how the council manages to demonstrate to us that there is the appropriate profile for the Section 95 officer, whilst it's not in line with what is accepted and written as good practice. So we don't have any concerns about the profile of the Section 95 officer or how that's operating, and we haven't made a recommendation there. But we draw it to your attention because it isn't strictly in line with what is published good practice. In terms of the benchmarking information, so at page 72, when we're setting out the performance information that is on track and not on track, that comes from the Council's own reporting against its KPIs, against service delivery plans. And for every council, the KPIs will be different because the councils will have different priorities. So it's not appropriate to compare those figures directly, or not easy to do so. That information is for elected members to hold officers to account against the strategic priorities. Where more direct comparisons are possible is the local government benchmarking framework information, where that has consistent indicators across all councils. And that's the information that we refer to in a key message that says that the council it shows that 54% of service indicators are improving over time. So that's using the information in those standardised indicators. And that's where we take the information saying that 48% of indicators are in the top quartiles. And that's why it's so important that the council is discussing that comparative data, and that's how we've given credit to council for now making sure that members are aware of those comparisons, both at a national level and in terms of family groupings, where sometimes, of course, it's not appropriate to compare you with Glasgow or Edinburgh, but the family grouping information is available too, and that is included and reflected in the reports that you get now from officers on the local government benchmarking framework, and that's where those comparisons provide useful data to help you to focus your improvements. So I hope that in terms of the costing of the impact of the changes in the structures, I feel like that's not something we would be looking at. I think it's to the council to decide what structures are most appropriate for itself, and it's for the council to review the effectiveness of those arrangements. And of course we would look for best value and value for money in all of that, but that's clearly not just a cost issue there, that it needs to be balanced with the effectiveness of the arrangements. So that's why we expect the arrangements to be reviewed and reported on by the council itself. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. So, Councillor Marshall, hopefully those address the questions, even if you may have a few further ones, but is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, thanks for those responses. Yeah, I think, and it's quite right as well, I think it's up for us as councillors to ensure that the review or the new chief officer structure, it's crucial that has been restructured, because when you look at 101 on page 63, with regards to the transformational ideas going forward, that requires that workforce changes are required, with fewer but more multi-skilled staff required, and many staff will have to be supported and retrained to transfer into new or in-demand roles. So going forward through the council, I think it's about seeking reassurance that the new structure that's been implemented at the top will be able to drive that change that is required.
No, thanks, Councillor Marshall. And I think certainly cross-party, those questions are being asked of the senior team, because I think we expect, particularly in challenging budget circumstances, we do expect the resource that we've made available to be able to drive forward that transformation and bring those offers to members so we can make the decisions that are difficult enough at the best of times. So I don't see any other questions or hands up on the list. So with that, can we go to the recommendations? We've already received the external auditor's report, but are we happy at this point to approve the letter of representation to be certified by Interim Chief Financial Officer as at Appendix 2, and approve the audited accounts, which will be certified by Interim Chief Financial Officer and Audit Scotland after this meeting at Appendix 3, and then note that the certified accounts will be made available to all members before the 30th of November 2024, and then they'll be available from the Council's website as well. Happy to agree that?
Agreed.
Thank you. So that takes us on to item 5, which is review of council-wide risks. And we have Martin Ogilvie, Vlad Valiente and Mark Thompson available to assist members with any questions. So without rushing to members' questions first, is there anything you'd like to add to the report between you? No? Okay, any questions?
Nothing from me, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Martin. So any questions on this report? Councillor Beretti.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Martin. I'm assuming you were listening into the first component. Not surprisingly, my question is going to be both resilience related and on the back of Councillor Dasper's question about the cyber security. On page 223 and 224, it is mentioned about the possible consequences of the council and its community. And on the first part, it doesn't mention cyber security, but I'm assuming that's built into it. And on the second part, it does mention cyber security, and certainly on page 224, it does mention cyber security and power outages. Are we ready? Because I believe this weekend we're about to receive a severe weather storm warning and potential power outages right across Dumfries and Galloway. So what is the current situation? How would you see it, Martin? Thanks.
Thanks,
Okay, I'll
Councillor
try and
Beretti.
cover off.
Sorry, on you go, Martin.
I'll just try and cover off some of the aspects of that. So first of all, in terms of monitoring severe weather, we've got quite a mature system of duty officers and colleagues in different other teams monitoring weather alerts. We do know there will be a weather warning for this weekend. There will be some snow coming across the UK and Scotland, the West Coast particularly, on Saturday morning. Will thaw quite quickly. It shouldn't pose a particular risk in terms of a national power outage or a cyber attack. In terms of cyber, given the significance of cyber, there is a separate corporate-wide risk on that will have been previously reported to this committee and will, of course, in a cyclical way, come back in and again be reported here. So I won't cover off too much, particularly on cyber, other than to say that corporate risk 01, Councillor Beretti, is really about our duty to maintain business continuity plans. As you know, the Civil Contingencies Act puts a requirement on all Category 1 responders, it includes ourselves, to not only be able to respond to an emergency, but also at the same time to continue the delivery of essential services at the appropriate level. So there's a lot of effort goes in across services to make sure they do have business continuity plans in place. One of the scenarios that they will look at in the preparation of their business continuity plans is the loss of IT, which would cover off the cyber risk. And there's been a huge amount of mitigation by colleagues in BTS and in other services to move away from single points of failure and to try and put more stuff on the cloud with more backups and with more manual alternatives as well. So there's been a significant piece of work, I think, coming out of COVID and learning from that in terms of our stance on resilience and in particularly the cyber risk. I mean, it's one that's continually evolving and the threat will continue to change, and the malevolent actors will try to always work out new ways to get past the different firewalls and protections that we all put in place. But I say, rather than step on colleagues' toes, there is a particular risk on that, and again, it will come to this committee in a cyclical way in due course.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Martin, for your report. I just wanted to go to the actions to reduce the impact on the score, because it is it's a relatively middle of the cube risk that we're actually doing, and in particular the number one is upskilling of decision makers and further crisis management training for SLT, and then rehearsal, testing, maintenance and contingency plans and incidents. I'm just wondering when was the last time you had an incident exercise, and have you seen improvement in the upskilling of those decision makers?
Okay, good question, and really nice to see you, Archie. There has been a programme put in place under the new chief executive to put more training, to give more training to chief officers. All the chief officers take turns as being the on-call strategic lead. So my team will provide 365 days of the year a duty resilience officer, an advisor, to do the tactical monitoring and the advising. But at the strategic level, all members of CMT take turns at doing that. They have had training, they continue to do training. There is training for the chief exec and others twice a year. The next training is taking place in the final Thursday before Christmas in the Emergency Centre. And this council, and the chief in particular, has played a significant role in Scotland over recent months. She identified a gap in Scotland's capability, in the sense that in England there is multi-agency gold incident command training for all chief officers and all category 1 agencies across the whole of England and Wales. And coming up from Cumbria, one of her first questions to me was, can you book me into that training? And that training didn't exist. So I then liaised with Scottish Government and the Scottish Multi-Agency Training and Exercising Unit at Cambuslang Fire Service Headquarters. And over the last 18 months, we've now developed our first course equivalent in Scotland. And that has gone to Solace, it's gone to COSLA, it's gone to the Scottish Resilience Partnership chaired by the Chief Constable. And over the next few years, there will be training opportunities for all chief officers to go, and it will be a requirement, a mandatory requirement almost for all chief officers to go to Scotland, but certainly in this council, a requirement for all to go. The inaugural course takes place over 2 sessions between January and March next year. And the chief executive has again showed leadership nationally by saying that she wanted to be part of that inaugural course. And my head of service, head of Thriving Communities, will take the second place on that inaugural course. So it's a huge development, and genuinely I think it will increase Scotland's ability to have to reassure that we've got competent and confident chief officers chairing in the hot seat when it comes to a crisis response. It's a validated course. It's validated by the College of Policing. So the curriculum has been through its own proper auditing systems. And it will be an accredited course, something which, as I say, we hope that all chief officers in Scotland will do, but certainly in this council, all chief officers will do in a programme way over the next year or two as places become available.
Thanks for that, Martin. I just wonder then if I could talk to you offline about an opportunity to give a presentation to an organisation, APSI, which I am national chair of at the moment, and at a future date. I'm just not quite sure which advisory group that would be at, but I'll have a word with you offline, Martin, if that's okay.
No, they're very happy to help. And I just wanted to say that the council continues to punch above its weight nationally in terms of initiatives. We've already, as colleagues will know, and Mark is here as well, we've won COSLA Gold Awards for various aspects. So, our Persons at Risk database, our DG VOS system, but also some of the work we do in community resilience groups. Obviously, we've recently, last month, had the latest community council elections, and we're in the process of reaching out and renewing. But certainly before that last round of elections, we had 81 groups active, and councillors on the Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing Committee will know that in August, on the 29th of August, they committed that next year we'll be rolling out more support and more work for these community resilience groups. And we certainly lead the way in Scotland in terms of our capacity to harness, encourage, support and enable willing volunteers at a community level to step up when the time comes as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks. Good question, Archie, and I looked at the rehearsal side as well, but I think that's it's a shame you couldn't have included all that in the report, Martin, because it's actually really positive, encouraging news about punching above our weight, as you say, and sort of leading the way in Scotland to make not just local but national improvements, which so between the senior team, that's really positive, so thanks for that. Councillor Marshall?
Yeah, it's really just to ask Martin, I notice in both the significant service failure and layering of demands, I think there was probably a review in mid-2024 of the identified risks. And I'm just wondering, how far do we go with that? Because what I maybe would expect to see there is a potential escalation of current conflicts. You know, I'm thinking of Ukraine.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. The last time we brought this to committee was, as it says there, was December 2022. And colleagues will remember that was probably about 10 months into the first war in Europe, significant war in Europe since the end of the Second World War. And it was quite a dynamic period. We were witnessing a real escalation in fuel prices. There was inflation. The Bank of England base rate was up. There was also quite a significant cost of living pressure on a lot of communities as well. So it was really impacting, I think, locally for us on some of our service providers to continue to deliver key services, outsourced services, particularly in the care home sector. And we saw a lot of work with incident management teams to try and mitigate and manage, a transition to new arrangements. So, Councillor Marshall, I'm laughing slightly because when we re-reviewed this risk, it was, I think, done by our risk management group on the 18th of September, and since then, the world continues to change and is just as volatile almost as ever. We've seen obviously the results of the US presidential elections, but also the current president allowing medium-range weapons to be used in anger from British and UK weapons being allowed to be fired from Ukraine into Russia just within the last 48 hours. So I think, it just proves again just how volatile the world is, and we don't yet know how Russia will respond to that. And linking back, to Councillor Barretti's questions, it's such a volatile world, we don't know. That could result in an asymmetric response, such as a cyber attack. I've got no doubt there'll be lots of discussion at the risk management group the next time that this risk scoring is up for debate, as there was in September when it was up for debate last time. And we will continue to try to reflect some of the global uncertainty that does indirectly or directly ultimately end up impacting on service delivery and our ability to deal with not just the business continuity risk that's covered in risk 1, significant service failure, but also on the concurrent risk threat with the additional pressures of multiple demands being layered on services that I hope is captured in corporate risk 2. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you. And Mark, did you want to come in to add to that? It must be the weather. He's frozen on screen there. So and just while that's happening, I think Vlad's wanting to come in to add something. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Maybe just to give a wee bit of time for Mark to come back into the room if he can, but also just to give thank you, Martin. I think that gives a good overview of those two risks. I think importantly, there's and members have obviously spotted that there's a very significant interplay between a number of our corporate risks as such within our council-wide risk register, and they are interdependent on each other, and certainly these two are very much interlinked, but they're also interlinked to others that have been mentioned today, cyber security within that. So that's probably an important part in all of this. Mark, through the Chair's consent, I'll pass the baton on to yourself.
Thanks, Vlad, and thanks, Chair, and apologies, my connection dropped out there just at the most inopportune time. And just building upon the point that Councillor Marshall raised and Martin responded to, the fluidity of the picture, not only in terms of conflict and socio-economic issues, but the climate as well. These really provide that strong justification of why this is a corporate risk. Thankfully, Martin has been great in recent months and years in terms of actually highlighting in between scrutiny periods for this particular risk, highlighting areas of concern where we can actually actively scrutinise and look at this. So it's not as if we're just going to look at this, dust it off once a year and look at this. This is something that happens on a regular basis whenever we see a significant change, which will have that a potential negative impact on the council. So we certainly view it as one of our core corporate risks and treat it as such.
Okay, thanks for that. And I think that vigilance is both welcome and necessary because of obviously the target risk is exactly the same with the actual kind of risk is in the matrix, because I think we realise that there's certain things you can never really, all you can do is hold them steady, I suppose, at the best of times. So I think that we'll recognise that as elected members. So I don't see any other questions on the list, so we'll just go to the recommendations where we're asked to note for both the appendices and then consider the implications of significant service failure, which I think we have. So are members happy to agree that? Okay, thank you. So that takes us on to item 6. This is our internal audit plan update. And we've got Richard here to assist members if they have any questions. Richard, do you want to add anything to the report in front of us?
No, thank you, Chair, but I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So over to members. Any questions on this item? Councillor Beretti.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard. Just a quick one on page 232. You've got vehicle lease costs in progress to be reported January. At this stage, what's it looking like? Is it good, bad, indifferent, the sums that you're looking at, or the projection, given what we've just seen about costs and potential disruption?
Through you, Chair, the focus of the audit has been on the management of vehicle leases to ensure that they've been procured in the correct way, and that where they've moved on to a month-by-month contract, those arrangements have been appropriately in place. We are on the verge of having a draft report, which we'll bring back to you in January, so if I can hold my cards until then, Councillor Beretti, I'd appreciate it.
No, that's fine, Richard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, it's really just, as a new member of Audit and Risk, and it's a number of years since I sat on the Audit and Risk and Scrutiny Committee, I just thought it'd be quite helpful just to understand, we've got the programme of audits and, we've got them detailed, but I just thought it would be helpful maybe in future to put the origin of that, whether or not it was a planned audit, a required audit, if it's been requested through maybe a service committee, etc. It's just to understand there'll be certain audits that need and required to be done, but there's also ones that maybe are requested. So it's really just to get a better understanding of the origin of each of the audits.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Councillor Marshall. So Richard, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, this is an update to the audit plan that was brought to this committee in April. Point is noted. Just for background for yourself, I have regular meetings with service managers and executive directors to establish the risks that are taking place within the council, and that helps form my opinion as to what should be included within the audit plan. I am, however, happy to take representations from this committee of areas of concern. Obviously, whenever I consider putting something onto the audit plan, that is dependent on my view as to whether our team has the relevant skills and experience to provide an effective review for this committee. Does that provide a little bit of background? Thank you.
I think that's helpful, but I got the sense that Councillor Marshall was almost like in the table, if the sort of provenance or origin of the what drove the request for the audit was made clear. So it was like this came from members, this came from service leads, this came because it's required to do every period or whatever. So is that what you're asking, Councillor Marshall?
Yes, and I think it has been helpful to explain as well the process for elected members, you know, maybe through this committee to raise requests and then them to be looked at to see whether or not they merit an audit. But yeah, it's more about the origin of each one of those so we can understand, you know, the reason for the audit or exactly where it originated from.
Thank you. So it might just be an extra column in the table, for example, but I don't know if you can help with that, Richard.
Fair point, and I will make sure that when I bring the annual audit plan back to this committee in April, I put that as an extra column.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dashburn.
Thank you. Page 233, looking at 4.9, there's a few areas of concern which have been highlighted there for future consideration. I'm looking at privacy notices. Is this referring to elected member privacy notices in terms of how we handle data protection and stuff, like a disclaimer on our council website? Thanks.
I'm not actually sure, but Richard, maybe you can illuminate us. Thank you.
Thank you. Another word for privacy notices is fair processing notices, as referred to under GDPR. And this was a review to consider whether the privacy notices on the council website are correct, well, comprehensively and correctly reflecting the way we actually use the data that the council has. And again, because this piece of work is only at the planning stage, I don't have any conclusions at this stage, but the objective is to ensure that we can provide assurance to this committee that when we say to the public, we'll use your information in a certain way, that the council actually does use the information in that way, and in that way we comply with the regulations. Thank you.
Does that help, Councillor Dashburn?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll wait and see what the outcome from that is, but I am aware that there is a sort of draft statement of such that we can put on our council website in terms of how we individually as elected members handle data protection. So just in case anyone else isn't aware of that, but thanks.
Would that be included in the work that you're looking to carry out in terms of how individual members might use the information on the council website?
Confession time, this is the first I've been aware of it, but I think since the committee has expressed an interest in this, I will have a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't see any other questions on the list, but with that, are we basically happy to note and comment on the, note the progress and the planned work for the remainder of the year? Okay, thank you. Item 7 is the internal audit reports issued, and that again is we have Richard Fox, Lisa Arnold and Tom Higgins here, I think, to assist members if they had any questions. So we've got a couple of reports in front of us. The first one is on transport compliance, so I would suggest if we take that one first. Do members have any questions on that one? Councillor Beretti.
I hope it's the right one. Is it page 244, Chair? I take it that is part of the report you're talking about. Item point 13, council vehicles only driven by officers with the correct licence to do so. Does that mean, given that the comments that are on the next section, does that imply that sometimes our officers are actually having to drive vehicles where there should be another driver scheduled if it's to do with waste or whatever else? Does that mean, if that is the case, is that officer hours being taken away from his normal desk work? What is the situation? How does that read? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you want to pick this one up, Richard.
That particular aspect wasn't a focus of this audit. We've actually provided good assurance that the council has arrangements that council vehicles are only driven if you've actually got a correct licence. We use the Davis system to ensure that all licences are up to date and we get an automatic notification should any licence be suspended or any difficulties with it, and we provided good assurance. I've not looked at the operational aspects. I don't know whether Lisa is able to come into that.
I think just following on from what Richard has said, the audit provides good assurance that there are limited risks in terms of officers driving vehicles that their licence doesn't cover, in terms of the arrangements that we have in place at operational level.
Thanks. Lisa. Councillor Beretti.
Maybe the word limited risk, does that imply that it has happened or hasn't happened, and is it likely to happen in the future? Because we know that if we have a very tight number of drivers, it's certainly HGV, C and D pool, if we have members off, and certainly in the waste management team we know and have had experience of waste collections being cancelled because of that. So exactly how does it work?
So I think that's probably directed to you, Lisa.
So the service would never ask anybody to operate a vehicle that they're not qualified to drive. As you can see, we've got a specific system in place that records that information. So yeah, absolutely, we would cancel collecting bins over asking somebody to drive a vehicle that they weren't qualified to operate.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, I think it was just on page 242 that it was 9 that there is effective use of telematics to ensure safe driver behaviour. When you look at the comments, I think, you know, obviously welcome the fact that a report was generated, you know, of council vehicles being driven at speeds over 20% of the speed limit. So it's really just a case, you know, and then a sample of 20 cases was taken. So a welcome action point, audit action point 7, because of the low level of assurance that a policy will be implemented by April 2025. I suppose that's the earliest that policy can be developed.
Lisa, do you want to respond? Sort of rhetorical question, but I think, you know, it's kind of asking for that assurance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. There was a point just on the action plan, page 246, and it did allude to the toolbox talks in terms of action point 4 and the, I suppose, really around sort of driver behaviour, which I think was a sort of identified concern. But I suppose in terms of council reputation, etc., can we get that assurance that these programmes of work are underway and that they're likely to be delivered in terms of just improving that the service level that we provide?
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware of a number of reports that are going to the senior leadership team and the council management team on ensuring that ensuring driver safety across the council. I will again be working with the service to try and ensure that the appropriate measures are in place. Toolbox talks are an important thing within my learning portal. And I think it's important that we ensure that all staff are given the opportunity and time to do that mandatory training. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't see any further questions on this first item. So if we move on to Appendix 2, which is the Building Safety Report. Do we have any questions for Tom, I think, on this one? Members? Councillor Bretty.
I'm trying to keep up my record here. 252.6. This is actually going to be interesting where we have fire alarms and detectors. In some cases they're battery operated, in some cases they are grid operated. Has consideration been done as to what happens if the grid does fail and a fire happens? Where is the fire alarm in that position?
Thanks, Councillor Bretty. So, Tom, do you want to come in on that one?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the question. If there's a total failure, then there is battery backup within the system. That will last for a period of time, obviously. I think whenever we say we've got battery-operated fire alarms, they are wired hard to the main distribution board, but the battery backup is there in the off chance that there is a failure to the main supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer the question, Councillor Barretti?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dryborough.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm looking at page 256 on action point 7 about evac chairs and things like that. And we have seen a few evac chairs in some of the buildings that we've actually went into. And being a previous trainer in this side of things, I'm just wondering where we are with the ongoing discussions with the Council Building Safety Officer in reviewing that and getting training for people who may have to use them.
Thank you. Over to you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for that. These conversations are ongoing, Councillor Drysborough, with Corporate Health and Safety and the Building Safety Officer. There is indeed a need for these chairs for the obvious reasons, but there is an array of the chairs that year on, year off, we service, we maintain and we keep, but they're never used. But typically, my argument here is, and it will stand, is that we need the chairs to ensure that compliance is being upheld.
If I could come back in here and maybe ask the question, obviously we have a disabled, there's some disabled employees who may work on upper floors, and you've got to do reasonable adjustments, of course, for all different things. And I'm presuming what you're saying there, Tom, is that one of the reasonable adjustments is you would have them on the ground floor if it was possible.
Typically, they're on the first floor to ensure that there's an access
No,
point.
I didn't mean the chairs, Tom. I meant the people with disabilities.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. But, you know yourself, you can't restrict an individual to working within a certain area. And as a council, we wouldn't do that. So if there's a need or a want for the individual to want to work the first or the second floor, or thereby then the chairs are made available through an assessment, as you'll understand, the Council of Drysborough as an assessment of that, and a support mechanism, i.e. a member of staff that's available, and indeed if there is a fire, that both individuals meet at a certain point and assist the individual to get out the property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, I was just looking through all the findings, etc. I just wondered, and I'm not sure if really just seeking a little bit of clarity into the council's health and safety manual. I note that the lead occupier of the building, has a responsibility, and also the clerk of works. From a management perspective, that's action point 3. I just wondered if it was looked up, because I think Councillor Dryborough has raised this on a number of occasions, so of our, because I think he's the safety committee representative, but we have been trying to build up the number of safety representatives, from across the council, and I just wondered if there's any, if it'd been looked at, or if it's already being done, about like independent, safety rep inspection of certain buildings on an ongoing programme that would give an additional, check or view. You could select certain buildings at certain times, and a couple of safety reps could go in and just do a general kind of overview of the building.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Marshall. So biannually, there's a meeting takes place in each of our properties, along with the lead occupier and the clerk of works, that reviews the lead occupier's guide, and that guide's been sent to the members in the past, and it can certainly be sent again. And it's a list of different individual tasks for compliance, statutory compliance, where the clerk of works evolves, but there's also, to complete that circle of compliance, there's certain items that the lead occupier needs to carry out as well. So as I say, this is done on a biannual basis. Along with that, there's other review of certification, statutory certification, and our unions are invited to those meetings, as are our corporate health and safety representatives. Initially, that list is obviously long and far, because it allows for most events in any of our buildings, but the Clerk of Works in the past has reduced that down to the apparatus that's in the building, and agree the review process with the lead occupier.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you. I don't see other hands up, but I did have a question just around the PMIS system, and it is down there as an action in terms of potentially a new system being a bit more efficient at itemising our resources. Richard, I don't know if that's a question for yourself or for Tom in terms of the findings, because it does seem to say the system we have does account for the buildings, but there might be more efficient ways of doing that with improvements in software, for example. So I'll go straight to Tom, actually, because he's put his hand up first. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. So currently, PMIS is what we have, and we are looking to replace that. We've looked to a new system that roads are using, which just doesn't meet where we're looking to go to. And there is another two. In fact, there's meetings agreed for next week with other presentations with another supplier of a system that hopefully is a bit more up to date than the system that we're currently using. So we are on to that. We do understand that there may well be a cost implication there. However, we'll report that back and to the appropriate channels to ensure that we get the right thing, but also that the cost of that's encompassed elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions on this. So with that, we're happy to go to the recommendations, which are to note and comment on the finalised internal audit reports. Members comfortable with that? Thank you. And then this takes us on to item 8, which is the follow-up of internal audit reports. So I think we have Richard Fox, Stephen Morgan potentially, and Susan Martin somewhere on the call to assist with any questions. I don't know if you want to add anything prior to this, or we'll just go straight to questions.
I'm happy for you to go straight to questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Dryborough.
Yes, thanks, Chair. And this information wasn't available at our pre-meeting with regards to the budget consultation. And in the budget consultation, education are looking at potentially some savings on the pupil equity funds. So I'm happy with the rest of the report. I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate to keep an eye on that pupil equity fund because of the potential, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there is a risk of not being able to supply our children with things if it's required. So I'm happy with all the recommendations, just that I'm not very sure on the pupil equity funds because of the information that we've received since on the budget consultation.
Thanks, Councillor Dryborough. And I think I was going to ask a question about this as well, which just really around, obviously it went to Education Committee, the sort of Pupil Equity Funding report. And I think within that there is that, I suppose, need from elected members to see the information at an area committee level in terms of what Pupil Equity Funding has been used for. But I would assume that's going to be regular reporting and a change to the way that report. But I think if Susan's here, she can maybe speak to that in more detail about your concerns around the budget consultation as well. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, councillors. Yes, the report went to Education Committee as an overview report. We were then subsequently asked to take the detail for each school to area committees, and that work's ongoing as the current area committee cycle's ongoing. And then the plan is to pull that all together so that I think we were asked by members at Education Committee that all members could see the information for each of the areas, so that that information's not only given to area committees but given to everybody on Education Committee. So that will be pulled back together into a summary report and brought back in front of members as part of that reporting. And yes, I think that will become part of a cycle of reporting that becomes standard for the duration of Pupil Equity Fund.
And just on the point about I suppose, issues around budgeting and consultation, etc. So this is maybe relatively new information in terms of the budget being out to consultation, but what impact might that have on pupil equity funding if members want to keep a closer eye on it?
Sorry, I'm not clear. I wonder if I can ask for some clarification from Councillor Driver about, is this about the national budget, or is this about our own Dumfries and Galloway budget?
It's our own Dumfries and Galloway budget. There are some recommendations coming forward for the officers that we could take a look at PEF funding in some of the charts, and it was a bit of a concern that. It wasn't a concern. It was just new information came out about that prior, so after the pre-meeting with myself and the chair.
Okay, I'm not aware of that, Chair. So if I may, I could take that offline and get the information back to members of this committee, Councillor Driver and yourself and the other members. I'm not aware of the detail around that, so I can find that out and get it back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Susan. So any other questions on this one? So I don't see any other hands up. The only comment I was going to make was just around the kinship care arrangements and that coming back to committee in June 2025. Obviously, people may be aware that there has been, inspections of the service externally, and I just wondered if it would be helpful to speak about that, because clearly that's something that we take an interest in, and I suppose give it good reason to remain on the agenda, given the work that we need to do to continually improve our service. So, do we have Stephen Morgan here to speak to that? Or is that one you can pick up in the meantime? Oh, I see Sean Barrett here. I don't know if you'll be able to help with that one.
Thank you. Yes, it's members are aware we put mitigating measures into social work, and one of those was to strengthen the kinship care team. So that team has now been fully recruited into. So the concerns around about the visits will be happening, and we recognise the linkages to the fostering inspection, but I'm quite confident the report coming back that the service are looking to progress those issues that were raised in the first place. I hope that's an acceptable answer.
Well, I mean, it's the answer on the table. I think it was really just, obviously we're noting a report will come back about those arrangements, obviously, but it will be in people's minds because of the external inspection. So I don't see any other hands up, and I don't know if we can get any more information about that at this time, because obviously that's ongoing work, and a report is going to come back. So with that, I think we'll just go to recommendations. So we can note both the reports and then agree that no further reports are required on pupil equity funding, given the reporting arrangements that are now in place and the information that Susan's going to help provide for Councillor Driver and other members, and direct payments, revenue budgeting, and MITTS as well. So are members happy to agree that? Okay, thank you. Item 9 then is National Fraud Initiative update. Again, Richard, do you want to say a few words to this report, or just happy to open up to questions?
Again, I'm happy to open it up to questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So, members, any questions on this? Councillor Barretti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just as I've probably missed this somewhere, but there's reference to the Council's Integrity Group. Who is it, or what is it?
Thank you. Vlad, do you want to pick up this one?
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to send all members of the committee the link to our anti-fraud and anti-corruption statement that we have, which has our overall policy. It states within that a role for the Integrity Group, which is an internal group chaired both by myself and Section 95 officer. And in essence, what we look at is our overall kind of strategy and practice on fraud and corruption matters, and obviously anything that arises out of investigations or anything that arises out of internal audit work or external audit work, then we would pick up through that group. In essence, the purpose of the group is to improve our policy and practice and to continue that overall monitoring of any incidents that might arise. But I'll make an action to send that to all members. I think it's a good point.
Thank you. You want to come back, Councillor Barretti?
Yeah, no, just quickly, just to give me an idea of the size of the group. You've mentioned yourself and the Section 95 officer. So there's what, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? Shall I keep going? No?
Is relevant as depending on the nature of what we've got. So you can call in members into it. Primarily, the main role is obviously for the statutory officers first and foremost, and secondly, then we've got other senior managers within that group that might include, for example, HR, will include procurement within that. As I said, depending on the subject matter that we might discuss from time to time, other groups as well that might be called in. But there is a kind of core kind of membership within that, includes internal audit, by the way, within that as well. So there is a core element of it, and then depending on subject matter, you may bring from time to time kind of subject experts.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, it's just following on from that, because it's obviously an internal, the integrity group is an internal group with no elected member involvement. And I'm just wondering, you know, because quite interested in reading this report and all the different data sets and areas where, you know, a local authority could be, you know, there could be fraud enacted. So I'm just wondering, is there any annual report, etc., or any update as you know, how many examples of fraud there is within the council? Because I think at least members should get an overview of, even maybe if it's on an annual basis, and maybe a comparison with other local authorities, because I think it's something that we should be aware of.
Well, thanks, Councillor Marshall. And I suppose in a way this report begs the question, but I don't know if Richard or Vlad wants to speak to this.
Yes, thank you. And Councillor Marshall's asking a very valid point. I think there's twofold. Is probably one, and that kind of more strategic element of it, and is what you've got in front of you in terms of the National Fraud Initiative and the reporting through that. And obviously, internal audit will report through that process. In terms of more in terms of the kind of any reportable elements of it for any established, and that's probably the important part, established frauds, and I've gone through that process, then we would be reporting them at some point through the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. But at the moment, I'm not in a position that I'd be reporting any at this point, because I don't have any. So it would only be when we've got those kind of learning cases that we would be reporting them to Audit, Risk and Scrutiny, and it might well be done through having identified through the National Fraud Initiative some of those cases that we further investigate. So that there's the strategic, and then there's a kind of more case management of it that would be reported through this committee.
Is that, can I just come back on that? Has that been done in the past, or what's happened in the past? Because obviously there's been fraud perpetrated on the council in the past, and I'm just wondering what was the reporting mechanism then?
Yeah, so I remember this coming up whenever the council was discussing, you know, just by association or otherwise, in terms of the roads contract, because we didn't really know what the details were. And I think that kind of revitalised the integrity group at that time. So I don't know if there's historical reporting. I suppose, as Vlad said there, you would only really report something if it was established, because you might otherwise prejudice something. But something could have happened historically that then becomes established, and then you would have to report that. So is there a timeline in that, or is there sort of historical things that would come through the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee?
No, I think the important element of it, I think you've highlighted. I think I got the question in terms of the historic element of it. Yes, it would be historic reporting that we would be doing, and you've hit the nail on the head, Chair, in terms of the importance of the criminal process to be had. Again, in terms of our policy on this is very clear, that when we've established from our perspective that there's fraud, then we would report that to the police, and that's the process. Police need to investigate it. We need to be really careful about tainting any evidence or discussing that in any forum, and thereafter the Procurator Fiscal will decide whether to prosecute or not, and obviously that might end up in court. So it's a rather long process, and I know that's frustrating for members, but unfortunately we're in a kind of sub judice kind of scenario in which we're not at liberty to be discussing such criminal processes in any other forum other than the criminal ones.
Sorry, can I just come back again, Chair? Yeah, I'm fully aware of that. I'm not asking for ones that are ongoing. I'm asking for when it has been proven and it's went through the due process and the criminal proceedings, etc., there's a mechanism that's reported back to the council. Because, and as Stephen rightly points out, the roads issue, which kind of brought it to a head, but I'm assuming that there has been examples in the past, and I can't remember as a council when we had a regular reporting or we had a summary of that each year. So what we're looking at is, where it has been proven and it has went through the due process, there hasn't been a mechanism, I don't think, in the past when it's been reported to council, and that's what I'm asking for.
No, I totally get that, Councillor Marshall. So, Vlad, I don't know if that's something, maybe it's an action that we can pick up in terms of where are those historical reports, if there are any, and how would they come to members? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. I think I'm not aware of any convictions in terms of fraud relating to the council, but what I'll do is I'll certainly further investigate that. It might have been prior to my time, but certainly since I've been here, I've not been made aware in my role of any convictions. I am aware of referrals that we have made to the police, but they have not determined fraud or are in the process of, so I wouldn't be at liberty to discuss those. But in terms of that historic element, I'll take away an action just to see whether I've missed any convictions, but I'm not aware of any, certainly in the last few years.
Okay, thank you. Does that help? In the meantime, Councillor Marshall, then we can maybe see what comes back from that and then follow it up.
Yes, it does, but it's not just ones that have, went through the criminal process. It could be, the likes of housing benefit fraud, etc., things like that have been dealt with or removed. People have been claiming over that, and sometimes might not necessarily, it might be stopped but not go through criminal prosecution.
Yeah, so I think Vlad's nodding, so I think so that'll be part of the information he's able to bring back, I think, if that's okay. Councillor Stick.
Thanks, Chair. It's just in Appendix 3. This might be a daft question, but when you look at creditors' history, creditor standing, council tax, single person, they're only taking high risks will be checked. Is this through time consumption or that?
So I'll pass over to Richard for this one, I think.
Thank you, Chair. The nature of NFI is that some matches are better quality than others because the NFI system uses some sort of fuzzy logic. We found in the case of creditors that a lot of the matches reported to us don't actually result in an error or a financial benefit to the council. And at the same time, they also, to go through 3,000 matches actually takes a significant amount of officer time, which is not cost effective for officers if we don't achieve the financial benefits result. So what we did last year, given the limitation of officer time, we actually leaned on Audit Scotland, who assisted us with identifying the highest risk matches, and those were investigated thoroughly, as opposed to looking at all of them. Thank you.
Okay, so it's a question of expediency, I suppose. Okay, I don't see any other hands up in this one, but obviously there's an action resulting from that, so that's helpful. So are we happy to agree that we've noted and commented on the progress with the National Fraud Initiative? Okay, thank you. So I think that concludes the proceedings. I have no further items for today. So with that, thank you all for your contributions and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.